Traditional education is also known as back to basics. Conventional education or customary education refers to long-established customs found in schools that society traditionally used. Some forms of education reform promote the adoption of progressive education practices, a more holistic approach which focuses on individual students' needs and self-expression. In the eyes of reformers, traditional teacher-centered methods focused on rote learning and memorization must be abandoned in favor of student-centered and task-based approaches to learning. However, many parents and conservative citizens are concerned with the maintenance of objective educational standards based on testing, which favors a more traditional approach. Depending on the context, the opposite of traditional education may be progressive education, modern education, or alternative education. Definition. The definition of traditional education varies greatly with geography and by historical period. The chief business of traditional education is to transmit to a next generation those skills, facts, and standards of moral and social conduct that adults consider to be necessary for the next generation's material and social success. As beneficiaries of this scheme, which educational progressivist John Dewey described as being imposed from above and from outside, the students are expected to docilely and obediently receive and believe these fixed answers. Teachers are the instruments by which this knowledge is communicated and these standards of behavior enforced. Historically, the primary educational technique of traditional education was simple oral recitation. In a typical approach, students sat quietly at their places and listened to one student after another recite his or her lesson, until each had been called upon. The teacher's primary activity was assigning and listening to these recitations. Students studied and memorized the assignments at home. A test or oral examination might be given at the end of a unit, and the process, which was called assignment, study, recitation, test, was repeated. School sucks so bad that they banned it in Africa. Insertion and alternative education. Traditional schooling in Britain and its possessions and former colonies tends to follow the English public school style of strictly enforced uniforms and a militaristic style of discipline. This can be contrasted with South African, USA and Australian schools, which can have a much higher tolerance for spontaneous student-to-teacher communication. The school was instruction center, main objective high test scores, grades, graduation, learning, retention, accumulation of valuable knowledge and skilled classroom students matched by age, and possibly also by ability. All students in a classroom are taught the same material. Students dynamically grouped by interest or ability for each project or subject, with the possibility of different groups each hour of the day. Multi-age classrooms or open classroom. Traditional education emphasizes direct instruction and lecture seat work. Students learn through listening and observation. Progressive education emphasizes hands-on activities, student-led discovery, group activities, materials, instruction based on textbooks, lectures, and individual written assignments, project-based instruction using any available resource including internet, library and outside experts, subjects, individual, independent subjects. Little connection between topics, integrated, interdisciplinary subjects or theme-based units, such as reading a story about cooking a meal and calculating the cost of the food. Content, memorization of facts, objective information, correct knowledge is paramount, understanding the facts, application of facts, analysis, evaluation, innovation, critical thinking is paramount, focus on independent learning. Socializing largely discouraged except for extracurricular activities and teamwork-based projects. Significant attention to social development, including teamwork, interpersonal relationships, and self-awareness. Multiple track. A single, unified curriculum for all students, regardless of ability or interest. Diverse class offerings without tracking, so that students receive a custom-tailored education. With school to work, academically weak students must take some advanced classes, while the college-bound may have to spend half-days job shadowing at local businesses. Students choose different kinds of classes according to their perceived abilities or career plans. Decisions made early in education may preclude changes later, as a student on a vo-tech track may not have completed necessary prerequisite classes to switch to a university preparation program. Equity, present and test methods favor students who have prior exposure to the material or exposure in multiple contexts. Requirements to study or memorize outside school inadvertently tests homes, not students. Students from homes where tested subjects are used in common conversation, or homes where students are routinely given individual help to gain context beyond memorization, score on tests at significantly higher levels. Context learning integrates personal knowledge within the school environment. Individualized expectations simplifies individual supports and keeps focused. Student-based community study settings include multiple cultures and expose all students to diversity. Student and teacher relationship. Students often address teachers formally by their last names. The teacher is considered a respected role model in the community. Students should obey the teacher. Proper behavior for the university or professional work community is emphasized. In alternative schools, students may be allowed to call teachers by their first names. Students and teachers may work together as collaborators. Traditional approach communicating with parents. A few numbers, letters, or words are used to summarize overall achievement in each class. Marks may be assigned according to objective criteria and reference test, individual performance, or compared to other students. A passing grade may or may not signify mastery. A failing student may know the material but not complete homework assignments, and a passing student may turn in all homework but still not understand the material. Many possible forms of communicating achievements. Teachers may be required to write personalized narrative evaluations about student achievement and abilities. A government agency may require all students to pass a test. Students who fail to perform adequately on the test may not be promoted. Expectations. Students will graduate with different grades. Some students will fail due to poor performance based on a lack of understanding or incomplete assignments. All students need to achieve a basic level of education, even if this means spending extra years in school. Grade inflation, deflation. Achievement based on performance compared to a reasonably stable, probably informal standard which is highly similar to what previous students experienced. The value of any given mark is often hard to standardize in alternative grading schemes. Comparison of students in different classes may be difficult or impossible. Subject areas.